This is part 2 of the wall section, and we're going to add annotation, insulation, and dimensions, and hatching. So we'll start with the hatching. I'm going to switch to the detail 1 layer, and I want a hatch pattern to fill in that will be a concrete hatch pattern. The command to use to fill hatches is bhatch or bh at the command line. And under the Hatch tab in the Hatch and Gradient dialog box, the type and pattern can be defined by either clicking to define the type of hatch pattern you want to use, and we're going to use predefined, and then the pattern, which is listed by name, or what I prefer is to click on the swatch hatch and actually visually look at the hatch patterns to find the one that I want. This AR concrete is the hatch pattern we want to use. The AR stands for architectural, so all the ones that begin with AR are automatically scaled properly for you to use on architectural drawings, which means we don't have to make any changes to the angle and the scale when we get down here. So I'm going to choose AR concrete, hit OK. Switch the scale back to 1, which is what the original scale was for the angle, and the angle will stay at 0. To place this hatch within that area of the concrete wall, under boundaries I'm going to click on add pick points, and then just click inside the area that I want to fill that hatch with, and you see that it finds the boundaries on the screen. Hit enter and then always do a preview, and if the hatch pattern looks fine, hit enter again and you're done with the hatch command. Next we're going to go ahead and do the insulation, and there should be some insulation filled in here. If we flip to the assembly and section, you can see where the insulation belongs in the floor floor cavity, in between the header, and then we can get a little bit of insulation in the floor cavity here, then at the bottom of the window, and then in between the header up here. And there would be 2 layers of insulation here in the ceiling. Switch back to AutoCAD. Alright, so I'm going to use a block that I created that we can insert from the R drive. So if you type in I and enter, we want to browse and go into the AEDD 115 folder. Go into resources, and I know this isn't the folder that's normally for this class, but I know that the block is here, so we're just going to find it here. Go into resources, go into Como, and right there at the root of that Como directory or a folder, you'll see a dynamic insulation block. Highlight that, hit open, and then just have the insertion point turned on and hit OK. Now the block's going to come in leaning in this direction. We want this to be rotated in this direction, but this block is a dynamic block and it has a lookup table. And what I want to do is set this to a horizontal 2x10 position, and then I can move the block within the floor cavity, then select the block and use this arrow to drag over to this side, and that's going to fill that area with insulation. I just need to make an adjustment so that it looks like it's going right to the outside face there. There we go. So the next one up, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to insert that same block, just insert it off to the side, and in this example it should be a horizontal 2x8, and then we want to move that block somewhere around here, and then I want to drag it over to the side. Now inside this space here, we may have to explode the block to get it to fit in here. We'll see if it will work. I'm going to insert the block, and it comes in as a vertical 2x4, and so let's see if that will fit. So I'm going to use the move command and put it right in here. It's overlapping a little bit, but I'm not going to worry about it. We're just going to fill that in. It's going to be enough to show that there's insulation in there. We can explode those all after the fact as well, and then actually scale them. So let's scale all of these. So that we'll do a reference from here to here to make them a little bit smaller. And I just need to copy a couple of these up now. Well, we won't worry about that piece. Now this should be in the on the detail 1 layer, so it's a very light line weight. So we had to, those were the only ones that we had to explode, and you see what happens when they explode into individual arcs and lines. Alright, so here's where we want to use vertical 2x6, so I'm going to insert the same block, change this to vertical 2x6, move the block into the wall cavity, and then use the arrow to expand it. The header up on the above should be the same as the one down below, so I'm just going to grab these, copy them, and move them up to the header above. I just don't need quite as many, so we can get rid of all the extras that are going to be overlapping the window. There. Now I want just 2 layers of that insulation, so I'm going to insert the horizontal 2x6 this time, so 2x6H, and I want to move this over to here, expand it all the way to the end, and then I want to just copy that whole row up 1, because we'd have 2 rows of insulation up there in the ceiling joist. Now we will eventually, well, no, we won't in this class, but if we were to add a roof detail here, then we would trim this insulation back so that the roof detail wasn't running into the insulation. So now we have all the insulation filled in the proper places, and I want to add annotation. So I'm going to switch to the A-Anno DIMS layer, and I need to set up a layout for this and set up a correct scale before I start to apply any annotation, because annotation, remember, is scaled up and down based on the drawing scale. So I want to go to Layout 2. I'm going to right click and choose Page Setup Manager, Modify. I'm going to change the sheet to printer plotter to DWF6 ePlot, and change the sheet size to Arc Full Bleed C, 24 by 18. And I want to change the pen table to monochrome CTB, and then hit OK. Now I think this is going to fit a lot better in a vertical position, so I'm actually going to go right back into Page Setup Manager and make one more change this from portrait to landscape. You can see that puts the sheet in the portrait position instead. Now I can move the viewport so it's centered, change the size of the viewport, double click inside the viewport, zoom in on my detail, and set it to 1/2 inch equals a foot scale. Looks like we could even try a 3/4 of an inch equals a foot scale. This should be on the viewports layer, the viewport itself, and then I'm going to go ahead and insert a title block to put in here. So I for insert, browse, go to the R drive, general folder, and find the title block called TC inch this time, and hit open. So I'm going to insert this here, and then I want to rotate it into position. Because we're using this in a portrait position, we've got to move the title block into a slightly different position than we would obviously if we were in the normal horizontal position. Alright, so that gets the title block in here. We have our viewport, we have the scale set up. So I want to lock down this viewport, and now I can start adding my annotation and dimensions. We'll do that in the very next video.